Hello, good afternoon. My name is Udode Godwin. Welcome back to Much Economics. Our discussion for today is about the consumption function. So we've been talking about the aggregate expenditure approach for a while now, and we understand consumption to be what is done by households in the technical sense of the matter. Now, the consumption function is a function that shows the relationship between consumption and income, and every other factor that influences consumption. For example, for instance, if we are concerned about what the demand function is, the demand function is just a function that shows the relationship between quantity demanded and the factors influencing demand, such as the price of a commodity, the price of a related good, and so on and so forth. So there is no difference between that and when we talk about the consumption function. However, consumption function has been reduced to showing to be a function that shows the relationship between consumption and income, whatever income as the case may be. But we should understand that there are other factors influencing consumption that are far different from the income of a consumer. Now let us talk about some of the consumption functions that we have that are as a result of different consumption hypotheses. And number one, we have the absolute income consumption function. In this particular case, the current consumption is seen to be as a result of the current income of a consumer. Now, in the technical sense of it, current consumption is seen to be influenced by the current disposable income of a consumer. So when we have a function that shows the relationship between the current consumption expenditure of an household or of an individual and the current disposable income of an individual or an household, we already have an absolute income consumption function. Now, number two, we have the relative income consumption function. Now, this is a consumption function that shows the relationship between the current consumption of a consumer and the relative income of a consumer. Now, when we are saying the relative income of the consumer, this simply means that consumption is just not a function of how much an household makes, but also depends on how much an household makes in relation to other people in relation to other people in the society. Now, this is what it means in a very simple way. Now, if there is an individual that lives in a society, or if there is an household that moves into a particular society where every other household or where an average household sends his or her children to an expensive school, Now, it really does not matter if this new household that is just moving into the neighborhood is as rich as other households that are existing in the neighborhood. What this relative income hypothesis, which is what this relative income consumption function, which is as a result of the relative income hypothesis, is saying is that the new household is likely to also send his or her children, the new household is also likely to send his or her children to expensive schools. So it simply means that the consumption pattern of an individual depends on the consumption patterns of those living around the individual. So that is what the relative income consumption function is all about. And this particular hypothesis, relative income consumption function, because I was talking about it being a result of being an expression of relative income hypothesis, is actually an improvement on the absolute income hypothesis that brought about the absolute income consumption function. There were things that the absolute income consumption function couldn't explain, especially in the long run. What causes the long run pattern of the consumption spending of households? Of households. So there were things in the long run, So there were things it couldn't explain in the long run that the relative income seeks to explain. See, theories and hypotheses and all of these things don't just develop until an existing body of theory fails to be relevant, to be useful to the data, to what is happening empirically in the society, which then is going to lead to an introduction of a new theory or a new hypothesis that explains the current situation. So that is what brings about all of these income hypotheses. Anyway, so let's move away from the relative income consumption function and then to permanent income consumption function. Now, the permanent income consumption function is saying that an individual or an household's consumption spending pattern is not dependent on the absolute income that it currently earns, nor is it dependent on the income of the household or the income of the consumer relative to the income of other people in the society, but depends on the permanent income of the consumer. This was developed by some other people, but So how do we really know what the permanent income of a consumer is over a consumer's period of time or period of life? So this particular hypothesis is assuming that C, which is the current consumption, is a function. So this consumption function is just saying that C is a consumption function that is influenced by the permanent income sold or an individual earns at the end of the day. Now, number 4, we talk about the life cycle consumption function. So, in short, the life cycle income consumption function assumes that there is a period in the life of an individual where consumption is expected to be high, and there is a period when savings is expected to be more than consumption, and so on and so forth. Okay, I was saying at the beginning that income, the different types of income are not just the only factors influencing consumption behavior of individuals and households. So I've listed some other factors that can influence the consumption pattern of people, of households, and so on and so forth. So number 1 is taxes. Now, tax is a levy. So the higher the tax on the income of individuals, what is going to happen? The lower the disposable income, and the lower the disposable income, the lower the consumption spending compared on average to when the taxes were lower. Now, number 2, the real interest rate. Now, you see, the decision to spend on consumption, on present consumption, is also the decision to save. Okay, so if the real interest rate is significantly high, individuals and households can start to save their money in order to recoup the returns on their savings, rather than spending their money on current consumption. That is, individuals would then prefer to defer gratification, that is, spend their money in the future rather than spending the money now with the big interest rate as their reward on their savings, and so on and so forth. Okay, and the lower the real interest rate, the lower the tendency of households to save their money in banks or in other financial institutions that bring about return, and the higher the consumption spending is going to be. Now, number 3, we have past consumption. I don't know if that's ever occurred to you that you just wake up one day and then you make a decision that, oh, I spent a lot last week, or I spent a lot last month, or I spent a lot last year, and this year I don't really want to spend that much. So in that situation, so there are cases where what we consume now is actually dependent on what we consumed before. Okay, so if we felt that, or if we feel that we spent a lot in the previous period, in the past year, in the past month, we may decide to spend less in the current period. So they are human beings, so there are times that stuff like that happen to people. Okay, number 4, future consumption. So future consumption, if you think that, okay, I would like to consume more in the future, I would like to increase my future consumption rather than consuming more right now. That is, I want to defer gratification, I want to put my money somewhere for the money to yield returns, and so it's synonymous with what we have here when we're talking about the real interest rate. So I don't want to, I would like to consume more later on than consuming more now. So in that case, an individual's current consumption is then influenced by the future consumption that the person is expecting. And if someone is a carefree person, you don't really care about spending. You don't really care about spending a lot in the future. You want everything now. You want to spend everything now. And that, of course, is going to influence what you are going to spend now. So there's this expectation, there's this future consumption. I be like, okay, I want to be better off next year. I want to put my money together to be able to buy maybe a car next year, maybe to buy a house in the next few years, maybe to just do 1 or 2 things, and because of that, you reduce your current consumption. And if you think, okay, I don't really care, let me just spend a lot now, So all of those things also come into place when an individual is planning what to currently spend. 5, we have wealth. So wealth equals assets minus liabilities, and assets is what brings money to your pocket. Liabilities are the things that take money away from your pocket, such as debt and loans. So when an individual expresses an increase in wealth, that is an increase in assets, it's 2 ways. Whether an individual expresses an increase in assets, or an individual experiences a reduction in liabilities. Okay, it simply means the individual is wealthier now, and the individual is likely to spend more right now. Okay, to spend more than what the individual was spending before, when the wealth hasn't increased. Now, and the other way around as well. So if an individual experiences a fall in wealth, okay, an individual is likely to spend less on current consumption than he or she was spending before the reduction in wealth occurred. Now, number six, we have the future income. Now, this is actually getting interesting. Now, have you ever been in a situation where maybe your boss just promises you that there's going to be an increase in your pay maybe in the next few months, or maybe your parents or maybe your uncle just promises you that, okay, next week I'm going to give you some money? Is there, as something like that has ever happened to you? You know that it is certain that an individual, someone else is going to put money into your pocket, maybe the government, and so on and so forth. So how does it really affect you? So personally, I think from what has happened to me, immediately someone promises me that, okay, I'm going to give you some money, and there's a way to affect my current consumption. I tend to spend more currently because I think, of course, I'm going to have more money later. So what's the point of saving a lot today, when I'm of course going to have more? So there's this particular tendency of spending more. So when the future income, there's an expectation of a future income that is certain, so it reduces the savings that are made in the present day, and it increases current consumption. Okay, I'm not saying this is always the case. I'm just saying that most times that is what actually happens. So when there is a certainty of a future income, or an additional income in the future, so an individual tends to spend more today and spend less on savings, more on current consumption and less on savings. Now, number seven, we have windfall. Now, windfall is talking about a sudden amount of money that an individual receives that is actually large. Okay, so you weren't expecting it. So someone just in one way or the other, someone just gave you maybe 250,000 naira, $25,000. It just came your way. Something like that just came your way. So there's a way windfall also affects people. So when there is, or maybe someone winning a lottery, for example, you didn't know that you were going to win a lottery, a sports bets, or all of these ways that one could make money, suddenly. So you become an overnight millionaire. So how does that also influence? How does that influence people? So what that is going to do is that current consumption also is going to increase. So when there is a windfall, okay, current consumption is very, very likely to increase than when the windfall didn't occur, hasn't occurred. And when there is also a sudden loss in a lot of money, okay, a sudden loss, something just happens, just destroys everything you have, okay, and you lose a lot of money, you lose a lot of things. That is also going to reduce the consumption of an individual, regardless of the current income. Now, nothing may happen to the current income. The current income might still be fine, but there could have been a lot of destruction to one's properties. That could have led to a loss in value. Okay, in money that someone generally has. Maybe an investment just fails terribly. That a lot of money is being lost. So there is a way that also affects current consumption, even though the income of an individual hasn't changed. So when there is that kind of a thing, current consumption is likely to reduce. Yes. Number eight, we also have past disposable income immediate past disposable income. So now, what is that talking about? If you're a person that is used to earning large, you earn a high salary, you earn a high wages, and a high wage rather, and then there's a way you spend your money on consumption and savings. Of course, there's a way you just do your thing. There's a way you do your thing, and before you know it, you experience a reduction in income. Maybe you move into another business that isn't paying as much, and there are people who have difficulties in coping with these things. They for some time, they do not find a new combination of what they should spend their money on that is a reflection of their current income. Okay, so I don't know if you have someone that was rich in your neighborhood before, and the person becomes, let's say, less rich, or the person is not as rich as before. What is noticed is that the person still is likely to have those, the taste that he or she had, when the income was very, very high. So there are people who have difficulties in cutting back on their consumption even when their income has fallen, because the income they were receiving before was very, very high. Someone that was earning, let me say, maybe 2 million naira per month, and then something happens somewhere, maybe a recession, that led to a cutback in pay and so on and so on, and the pay fell to like 500,000, the person may not be able to adjust the current consumption, the way the income has fallen. The person may still be consuming what he or she was consuming before. Okay, and over time, the person may eventually be able to adjust, and the person may not be able to even adjust again, which might lead to a lot of things. Okay, a lot of things. It could lead to debts. I'm talking about owing money, because the spending habit before hasn't changed, hasn't been altered. So these are some of the factors I've listed out that also influence consumption. Besides the different types of income that have been put forth by different hypotheses. Okay, so there are more. If you see it and then you start to think of one or two things, there are more that will come into your mind. Of course, there could be some factors influencing your own consumption pattern that I don't even know. Okay, and those factors are realistic, and it could be what is happening to several other people. So that is the end of this particular video. So in the next video, we shall start talking about the absolute income consumption function. The bulk of, or a significant aspect of macroeconomics is around the absolute income, consumption function, and this one leads us to the aggregate expenditure, being equal to the national income, getting our equilibrium national income, and so on and so forth. So this particular consumption function was introduced by John Maynard Keynes. I know is a significant part of what we do in macroeconomics revolves around John Maynard Keynes. So this is the only place I'll be talking about these other income consumption functions resulting from their income hypothesis. So from the next video, we'll be talking about the absolute income consumption function, what it's about, who brought it, what are the things embedded in the absolute income consumption function, and so on and so forth. So if you enjoyed this video, please click on the like button. Leave any question behind, whether you have a question, you have a suggestion. Okay, I want this particular video, I've gone to this channel and I can't find the video. Okay, there's no problem with that. Leave your suggestions in the comment section. Invite your friends. You could be helping them to understand all of these things pretty well. Share this video with them. Subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications for more videos. See you next time. Thank you very much for watching.